I read one time that money is 80% discipline and 20% about what you know. And in my case, that's absolutely been true. There are so many distractions, so many shiny things to buy. And mastering the art of not overspending has been a skill that I've really had to work on. I know we've been talking a lot about Airbnb and financial freedom in real estate, but I wanted to take a few steps back and talk about a skill I had to learn in my early 20s that really set a good foundation for being able to invest in real estate. And that was me learning how to curb my tendency to want to overspend. Taking a few steps back, when I graduated from college, my first job out of college, I was making $28,000 a year. And I was still living in my college town. All my friends did a victory lap and they stayed in college for a fifth year. So at that point in time, it was really easy for me to kind of stay in a college budget mindset. But 2 years later, I got a different job. I made a little bit more money, not a lot more, but a little bit more. And I also was working in this, kind of shiny corporate office in downtown Kansas City. I also had an apartment down in the city in this really cool area. And so I fell into the trap of lifestyle creep, where the more money I made, the more money I spent. Now, I was raised in a very frugal household. I was lucky to have parents that instilled really good money mindsets and, taught me how to stretch a dollar and to not live outside of my means. And even with all of that, there were just all these shiny things. I wanted to project a certain lifestyle. I had friends at the time who had kind of this you only live once mentality and really liked to spend money on entertainment and travel and, again, just like all the shiny things. Luckily, I caught myself before I got into any kind of credit card debt. I just wasn't doing the right things with my money. I wasn't paying down my student loans. I wasn't paying down my car. I wasn't saving for my future. I was pretty much spending everything that I was making. I had to really put some habits in place to get myself back on the right track. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Here are a couple of habits that have really helped me in conquering my urge to kind of overspend. I would say all of these kind of habits really center around mindfulness and getting myself to slow down so I'm not making those impulse purchases. The first big habit that I really had to grasp onto is I needed a plan for my money. I needed to make a budget, I needed to track my budget, and I needed to have a bigger why for what my money was supposed to do. So for me, my bigger why was financial freedom. From the very first week that I stepped into that corporate office and I looked around at all those beige cubicles, I knew I did not want to be sitting at one of those cubicles until I was 65. I've had a lot of really cool moments in my career. I enjoy my W-2 job right now. I have a great boss. The work is really creative and exciting. But even with all that being true, I still have a goal of financial freedom. I don't want to be doing that until I'm 60 or 65. Your big why might be totally different. But my point is, when you're having to think about the long term and delayed gratification, you're gonna need a bigger why, because it's gonna kind of suck sometimes. You're gonna have to not do the fun dinners with friends if it's not within your budget. You're gonna have to pass up on clothes or whatever it may be that you really want to spend your money on at the time so that you can reach that bigger why. I did have a budget at the time, and there's tons of videos out there that you can watch on how to build a budget. But here's the thing, I had a budget, but where I fell down is I wasn't tracking against that budget. So I had a certain number for discretionary expenses like clothes, makeup, going out to dinner with friends. And with things like clothes, it's not like I was going out and purchasing designer handbags or anything even close to that. I was still doing a lot of my shopping at Target and on Amazon. But those $20, $30 purchases, they really, really add up. That is where the Mint app came in really handy for me. This is not sponsored by them. It'd be cool if it was, but it's not. But this Mint app is really awesome because you can put a budget in and then you can attach your bank account, credit card, debit card, whatever it is. And every time you have an expense, it will automatically go towards that budget that you've set in place for that. Tracking was really the big thing for me because again, I had a budget. I knew what I was supposed to be spending, but then I wasn't paying attention to that as I was making the purchases. Once I had the Mint app, I started really making a habit of, before I made a purchase, I'd go and check the app, see where I was with my budget, see if it was even within the budget for the month. And that was kind of my first little yield or stop sign in my head to get myself to slow down and be a little bit more mindful about my spending. The second habit or kind of practice I put in place, and this is still something that I, to this day, do every time I make a purchase. So I was salary. I wasn't getting like an hourly rate, but you know how many hours per week you're working. You know how many hours you're sitting in that desk or in front of a computer at your job. And so when I would go to make a purchase, I would, do the quick mental math of how many hours I would have to work to buy that thing or have that dinner, whatever the experience was. And I would say to myself, okay, think back to the last week or month. Think about a day that wasn't so great. Maybe it was really stressful. Is this thing worth how many hours it's going to take you sitting in that desk to pay for this thing? Because when you're working a W-2 job, you're trading your time for money and you're trading that money for things. Because my why of wanting financial freedom and wanting to not be in that desk when I was 65 was just so great, 90% of the time when I asked myself that question, the answer was, nope, it's not. I'd rather have financial freedom at a later point in time than have this latte or this sweater or whatever it may be. And that was a really good mindful technique that got me in the moment, got me to think about long-term goals instead of just the short-term gratification of whatever it was I wanted to buy at the time. Another habit I put in place for myself was every time I'd want to go buy something, I would think about the frame of mind or the emotions that I was feeling when I was wanting to buy that. Am I wanting to buy this thing because I'm wanting to project a certain image of myself? Am I trying to impress someone? Am I feeling anxious because it's on sale or I feel like it's not going to be available later in time? And it doesn't mean that I won't buy something if some of those things are true. But again, it's just a way that I get myself to kind of slow down, take a beat, and really assess like why I'm wanting to spend that money. Because again, at the time that I was really struggling with overspending, I wanted to have fancier clothes to project this very like professional image of myself. And it's okay to have some things, but man, I was falling into the trap of when the new seasons would come out, I would need kind of the latest and greatest of whatever the influencers were wearing. It's just a really, really quick way to blow your budget and overspend. By the way, I would not consider myself a minimalist by any stretch. I like having nice clothes and I love home decor and I can absolutely appreciate like an immaculately decorated home. But for me, I think it was more of the mindset of knowing that it's okay to like those things and want those things. It's not bad, but it's delayed gratification. It doesn't mean that I can't have a beautiful home with, all the decor I want at some point in time, but that time was not then. I also do think you need a healthy balance. So I'm not saying don't ever spend any money on anything fun because long-term goals are long-term goals. It's going to take you a while to get to whatever mountaintop you're trying to reach. But again, you just want to make sure that you make room in your budget and in your life for those long-term goals. And if you're not being mindful about how you're spending, and at least this was the case with me, I just wasn't being mindful. I was impulsively buying things and they would make me happy for a very short amount of time, but they weren't going to get me closer to those long-term goals, which is what I really, really, really wanted. The last tip, the last kind of like yellow light that I put in my brain before I buy anything, I really try not to buy anything as a reward for myself because, well, I've had a hard week at work and I deserve this. And I try not to use things as a reward system to get myself to do the hard things. Because if you're working long hours, you're going to have a hard week every single week. And there's always going to be a reason to reward yourself to kind of like get you through the day. And I think, again, that was one of the traps I was falling into. I was working really, really long hours. And so it was easy for me to say, well, I'm working hard, I deserve this. Or oh, well, I'm going into the office at 6 a.m. I'm going to get myself a fancy coffee. It's okay every once in a while, but when you're doing it all the time, it just eats into your budget. So even now, I just really tried to get out of the habit of buying things as a reward system for myself. So those are just a couple of tips that have helped me along the way. I hope they're helpful to you too. If they are, if you wouldn't mind, please give me a like and subscribe. And until next time, bye guys.